Excellent. Good afternoon, everyone. Yay. All right, and welcome to our panelists as well. As it's stated, this is such an important topic. Nationally, there's been a lot of talk about criminal justice reform, and so we thought it was important to have this discussion publicly so that you can hear some of our leaders at the various government agencies. And when we talk about criminal justice reform or criminal justice system in South Florida, what you're looking at here, this distinguished panel, are the heads of these government agencies that are involved in our criminal justice system. So what I want to do just very briefly is have them tell their name and their position, and I think that alone will tell you so much about them before we get started. Okay, so to my right.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Caruso. I'm the Federal Public Defender for the Southern District of Florida. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Randy Cates. I'm Special Counsel to the United States Attorney, Juan Antonio Gonzalez, who was supposed to be here today, and he extends his apologies. He had an emergency hearing that he needed to attend, but I'm very happy to be here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Harold Pryor, and I am the Broward County State Attorney.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Gordon Weeks, and I'm the Broward County Public Defender.
Good morning. I am not the head, but I am the neck that holds up the head, who is Catherine Fernandez Rundle, the State Attorney in the 11th Judicial Circuit. My name is Don Horn, and I serve as her Chief Assistant State Attorney for Administration.
I am Carlos Martinez. I'm the Public Defender for Miami-Dade County and also the President of the Florida Public Defender Association.
Well, now that we got all of the government officials out the way, I'd like to introduce you all to the subject matter experts. All right, I'm Desmond Meade, President of the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition.
And I am Leroy Jones from Neighbors and Neighbors Association, a returning citizen.
Thank you. And what I've learned in this profession is assumptions will get you in trouble. So I don't want to assume that everyone understands what we have here and the reason why you all are sitting like this. In every county in Florida, you have a state attorney and you have a public defender. They're both elected. You have here, down here, Mr. Martinez and Mr. Horn represent the state attorney's office and the public defender's office in Miami-Dade. So in Miami-Dade, if someone is arrested for a crime, Mr. Horn's office is going to determine what, if any, charges are going to be filed, and Mr. Martinez's office is going to possibly be provide the attorneys that will represent a person throughout those proceedings. Then when we move to Broward County, Mr. Pryor, State Attorney's Office.
The best county on
No, no comment until we're done. And then Mr. Weeks is the public defender there that's making that determination. And when it comes to federal crimes, Florida is divided into 3 sections. You have the Northern District, the Middle District, and the Southern District. Southern District covers from Fort Myers all the way down to Monroe County. So if you are charged with a federal crime in South Florida, Mr. Katz's office will be the office determining whether or not you're going to be prosecuted federally. And then if you are, Mr. Caruso's office is going to be the ones representing an individual federally on those charges. So that's why it's such a dynamic panel. And then our subject matter experts are very much necessary because they have experiences and knowledge and have done a lot of work in order to work on criminal justice reform as well. All right, so now to kick it off, again, not assuming that everyone just knows what we're talking about. My first question is, what is criminal justice reform? And what I'll do is I'll start with Mr. Horn. I used to work for your office, so I can do that. Go ahead.
And since you're a judge, now I'm going to have to comply. My view of what criminal justice reform is an opportunity for those of us who are involved in the criminal justice system, an opportunity to re-examine and reevaluate the role we play in this system. I think it's a critically important time for us to revisit what our mission is, what our mission ought to be, and how effective we are in reaching the goals of that mission. Fortunately for an office like ours, where, as we say, we practice smart justice, we are trying to do the things that some of these other offices are now trying to get to do, which is recognize that everybody who breaks the law is not necessarily a criminal. And if somebody's got an underlying mental health problem, drug problem, or some other type of issue, let's deal with that issue to keep them from coming back into the system. And so that reform, everybody breaks the law doesn't need to go to prison. Everybody breaks the law doesn't need to go to jail. And I think the time is now right for all of us in the system to kind of evaluate what our roles should be and what our goals should be.
And Mr. Mead, I want to ask you the same question, one of our subject matter experts. When we talk about criminal justice reform, what are we talking about?
So I'm going to take a little unconventional approach, and I think that
I knew you would.
I think that when we talk about criminal justice reform, I think it's more about connecting more to the humanity, right, of the least among us, right? I think a measure of a nation, of a country, of a community is judged by how it treats the most despised, believe it or not. And I think that once folks are able to connect with the humanity of the individual, we're able to address those underlying issues. And it's not just about after a person may have committed an offense. It's about what happened prior, because the best way to fight crime is to prevent it from happening in the first place. And so how are we addressing these underlying issues that causes the influx of bodies into the criminal justice system? And there's often, when you look at a map, you always see that the majority of the people going into the system are generally in the most impoverished areas, right? And that's where you see the most policing activities. And so understanding that at the end of the day, I think that we all are God's children. People of faith understands, and we're taught this every time, that that our higher power is not impressed by all of the bells and whistles. What our higher power is impressed with most is how do you treat the least among you. And I think we get that right, criminal justice reform is just going to be natural.
And before I go to the next one, anyone want to add anything else to what
So-
criminal justice reform means to them?
So I will.
Mr. Jones? Does it work?
There you go. So when you're talking about criminal justice reform, you're talking about all these different bodies that's affecting, let's say, one individual. So you got the court system, you got the federal, you got the state, you got probation, you got parole, you got house arrest, you got community service, and that individual or individuals all have to play a role with all of those departments or most of all of them. And the departments have, in some cases, have different mindsets of how to deal with the individual itself. And if that individual don't get the career training, the attention that it needs while it's in the system, and released into a society that don't have no assistance or nothing prepared to help them when they release, the cycle continues. So when we talk about criminal system, when we talk about criminal reform, we're talking about this body where you can actually privatize a prison that makes money. So we all know the prison system is about making money. And we talk about, in most cases, when you go in these rural areas, it's generations of families working in these prison systems. And how they survive is that they keep those jobs in the prison system. So based on a prison or a camp that you go to, right, you may have some wardens that's sensitive that offer these programs in the system, but then you might go to some prisons that don't offer no services to help the reentry part of the person coming out of incarceration. So the prison system's supposed to be, well, the system itself, reform really supposed to be reforming and advancing a person, when in most cases, like Desmond say, is not being sensitive to the person who it's helping. That's my point.
Maisha, can I make one other comment? And I think back to what Desmond said. The best way to deal with crime is to keep people from committing crime in the first place. And it just reminded me that one of the other entities that need to be involved in the criminal justice reform is the legislature. And I think back to when the state attorney brought me back out of private practice to the position I'm in now. One of the things we had available in Dade County was what's it called, with the kids who were absent from school.
The
Truancy Intervention Program, which was designed to have our office, the attorney's office, to go after the parents to encourage them to make sure that their kids were in school. We had a whole system set up. A certain number of absences were triggered. Why was that important? Grand jury had done a report. One of the primary indicators that a kid was going to end up engaged in criminal behavior, absenteeism from school. You know what the legislature did in its infinite wisdom? They did away with the budget and told us we could not do those programs, and then told us if we used our own funding that we got from them to those programs, they would cut our budget. These are the same folks who end up creating these laws with the minimum mandatory sentences tying the hands of the judges. These are the same folks who do the passing the laws that deal with the PERPs, the HOs, the HVOs, you name it, they got an acronym for it, for criminals, and of course, the more elevated, then the more significant sentence. They also need to have their eyes open to understand the role that they play by tying our hands as prosecutors sometime, by tying your hands as judges, and understanding that we need to be focused on trying to keep you from committing crime in the first place.
Great point. If I may, I want to add to that, and I want to expound on that. Mr. Horn, he's a legend, man, myth, and legend, and I want to acknowledge him on here, on this panel. But also, he mentioned the point of legislators, right? Having senators, state senators, and state reps who are going to Tallahassee to actually do the work to partner with us, stakeholders who are trying to initiate criminal justice reform. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point one out right here, an ideal state senator who is fighting every day for criminal justice reform and so many other things, and that's Senator Shevrin Jones right here. And I want to acknowledge him for his hard work. But I want to be real. I want to be real clear here. We're talking about criminal justice reform, right? And we're talking about the concept and the principle of it, right? But to any issue or any sickness, the first step is acknowledgement, right? And so the first step is for all the stakeholders, law enforcement officers, state attorneys, public defenders, right? Judges. We have to acknowledge that we have a criminal justice system that has been traditionally stacked against people of color and poor folk. If you don't acknowledge that, then we're going to continue to have panels like this, and there's only going to be few people that are actually going to do the work, and nothing actually is going to be done. And so it's a holistic approach. It's from the executive branch, and we know we have an executive branch that just ain't that cooperative here in the state of Florida in that realm. But we need help from the legislature. We need help from our public defenders. We need help from our law enforcement officers. We need help from our subject matter experts like Mr. Mead, right? We need to understand that we have a criminal justice system that's just been stacked against people of color, and that's the first step. And then we have to take the steps to creating restorative justice programs, promoting problem solving in therapeutic courts. We don't have to throw everyone in prison, but some people have to go. But also we have to understand that there are people with mental health issues and drug addiction issues that if we get to the root cause of their problem, we can fix many of the issues that we're seeing here in society. And so we should stay on course. We need to keep our eye on the prize, but also we have to understand leaders, chief law enforcement officers in circuits, we have to be bold in acknowledging that we have a problem and that we have a system that has traditionally not been fair and equitable to people of color and poor people. And once we do that, we can get the work done.
I would say when we create the legislation, we create the legislation where it's not wiggle room in it, where that person can take and look at that legislation and determine what that legislation really means. In most cases, when we see legislations, people don't understand really, if they're not a politician or in the process, they don't understand the language. That's my point of view. Like, we got to understand, the language have to be written where it's cut and dry and not wiggle room, where you can determine, you can look at it and you might see it different than I see it.
I think there is, and I think it's very important to mention this, because it's the elephant in the room, right? Because we have two competing interests, right? When you talk about crime or you talk about criminal justice, you have a retributive approach and you have a rehabilitative approach. And the problem is that you can't have a rehabilitative mindset if the dialogue is more along the lines of retributive, right? And so and it starts, believe it or not, it really does, because the issue around criminal justice reform is actually an issue that is symbolic of what is hurting our nation, right? And what I mean by that is that even when you use the word criminal, or when you use the word felon, right? We have seen by just putting the word illegal in front of someone else that they automatically dehumanizes that individual, and there's less empathy for the plight of people that's trying to come to this country. That's the same thing that we've seen in the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which actually had people celebrating the murder of innocent women, children, and men, right? When it should have been like aghast at the fact that we dropped a bomb and just obliterated people, right, who was not even in the war, right? It's the same mentality that says that because the person is a super predator, they're the convict, they're a felon. We even go as far as trying to differentiate, say, okay, they're the violent offender, they're the non-violent offender, which makes no sense because we all know that 95% of people that are incarcerated are coming out, whether they committed a serious offense or not. And it makes no sense to erect obstacles for people who may have been convicted of a violent offense. Because guess what? If I have an aggravated battery and I'm released back into Broward County, I can't get a job, I can't get education, I'm ostracized by my community, what do you think I'm going to do next? One of y'all going to be the next victim. And if we really want to talk about changing stuff and not being that next victim and giving people like me an opportunity to become Time 100 most influential in the world, or to become a MacArthur genius, you do that by removing those barriers and getting rid of these labels that's making the distinction between violent and nonviolent. At the end of the day, every human being that have served their time deserves an opportunity to successfully reintegrate back into their community, period.
Now, Mr. Martinez, I want to come to you, and then Mr. Caruso. Along the lines of what Mr. Mead was saying about going with the incarceration of people coming out. So statistics show that when we look worldwide, the U.S. is 5% of the world's population. So we are a very small slice of a big pie. Yet in the U.S., we represent 25% of those incarcerated. We are so small, but 25% of our people are incarcerated. So when we're looking nationally, and then, as we come into Florida, what do you think has been the impact of incarceration? Is it working? Has it had a significant impact? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a huge question, and I'll try to address it. Look, part of the problem with incarceration, part of the problem with what we have with the criminal legal system, I'm not going to call it justice system because it ain't justice. It's a criminal legal system. The problem that we have is we have too many people coming into it, too many people. I mean, how many people in here have gotten a traffic ticket or know somebody who got a traffic ticket in the last 5 years? Raise your hand. Do traffic tickets, other than DUIs, which are not traffic tickets, that's criminal, do traffic tickets really make us any safer? In Miami-Dade County, we had 1 million traffic tickets in 2019. 1 million traffic tickets. There are people who did not pay their tickets, got their licenses suspended. Then they got arrested for driving a suspended license. Then if you get your third one, it becomes a felony. So there are lots of things that we have that we need to go all the way back. And Desmond is 100% right. We have got to do right by the people who are getting out. Because if we want to be safe and we want them to have productive lives, we have got to eliminate so many barriers. There's so many barriers. I can't hire enough people in my office, and yet if I'm going to have them on a job where they're looking at criminal justice system data, they can't have a prior criminal history. So I'm precluded from hiring the type of people that will know how to deal better with my clients than the people who have never been through the system, but I can't hire them. So there are a lot of barriers. I mentioned traffic tickets because there are so many ways that people are coming into the system that is absurd. For trespassing, for sleeping on a bus bench, for being in a park after hours. Give me a freaking break. I mean, you are violating a law, but the question that I have, when you violated that law, did you injure somebody? Are you a danger to society? And if you're not, why don't we focus on the things that are? One of the most shocking things I found out when we looked at the Biscayne Park corruption scandal, the police department corruption scandal, one of the things that shocked me was the low clearance rate for burglaries in the United States. Anybody dare to guess? It's 15%. Now, I don't know about you, but if I got burglarized, I would feel pretty threatened. I would lose my sense of security. And yet, the solve rate is only 15%. So why are we not putting the resources to solve those crimes away from the traffic infraction type of policing to actually solving some of these crimes so that we are safer? So it's not just about legal reforms, not just about the individuals, is what are we doing with the money? How are we feeding this beast? My budget is based on, the charges and crimes, and I need attorneys, same thing with the state attorney, same thing with the prisons and everybody else. But imagine if there was a point in time where my budget could be half, the state attorney budget could be half, because we figured out how to help people in their community without criminalizing their behavior. And that's the challenge that we have, that I don't think what we're doing actually works very well. We are doing a lot of things in Miami-Dade County that are not being done around the state. So crime in Miami-Dade County keeps going down. When homicides went up throughout the entire country, Miami went down, Miami-Dade County. The homicide went down, gun violence went down. So when you look at some of the things that we're doing the right things. We're still getting too many people into the system.
And Mr. Caruso, on a federal level, what are you seeing and what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so, I have not been on a stage with so many diverse stakeholders where we're largely in agreement as to how we should move forward. With what we see on the federal side, and again, we only handle a very small percentage of the criminal cases that our state actors see. But what we have seen is something very similar, that, in my view, what has happened over the last 50 years is that, the legislature in the federal system, that's Congress, have largely abdicated their role with regard to the criminal legal system. They're elected officials, of course, and I think they react to what they perceive voters want. They perceive that voters want largely law and order candidates and officials. But in doing that, they just resort always to the most draconian or the most drastic penalties for whatever is in the news that quarter or that year, without any serious thought or discussion. It's often not televised, the congressional hearings regarding criminal legal reform, but what we do see, and is I think an apt analogy, is when a president nominates a person to be on the Supreme Court of the United States. Those hearings are always televised. And I don't know how many of you watched Ketanji Brown Jackson's confirmation hearing, but you see that that's not a serious discussion of, one, our civil and criminal legal systems. It's not even a serious discussion of her qualifications to be a justice. It's just politicians sort of grandstanding and lobbing bombs at one another. And so from the legislature's point of view, I think we just need to be more serious about the problems confronting our country and how to solve them, rather than the emphasis just on being reelected. And what politicians have done over the last 25 years in the federal system, like I said, is sort of abdicating their role and giving, in my view, Mr. Katz might have a different position, by shifting the balance of power from the judges in the federal system, who presumably are put on the bench so they can exercise their wisdom and judgment in individual cases, to prosecutors' offices. And not only that, but like Mr. Horn referred to earlier, by the devices of these mandatory minimum sentences, which is really just like a blunt instrument with regard to any particular crime, but leaving it up to a prosecutor's discretion and decision making. And I'll give you an example before I finish of how this system plays out in real life. Like almost everybody in this room, I believe, has heard of the school to prison pipeline, right? But what many people don't know, there's also a state court to federal court pipeline. So in the federal system, there's this set of laws called the Armed Career Criminal Act. This is an act that's designed to sort of impose a 15-year mandatory minimum sentence on a person who's only been charged with possessing a firearm after having three prior convictions. And there's no time limit for those convictions. So I've represented people who, for their own safety, have possessed a gun either, on their person or in their house, and hadn't been convicted of any crime for over 10 years, for 15 years, for 20 years, but they're still caught up in this system. But what had happened a number of years ago is the Supreme Court of the United States issued a case which sort of narrowed the definition of what constituted a felony that would trigger this 15-year mandatory minimum. And at the time, I got a list of all the people who were currently in prison, who had been prosecuted in the Southern District of Florida. It was a list of one woman, but then almost 800 men were on this list. So I had an intern research the demographics of those 800 people who were currently in prison based on this Armed Career Criminal Act. And it's not going to surprise you that 92% of those people were Black or African American. And this should be concerning to everyone, because this is not an instance of, oh, the police just stumbled upon a person committing a crime and they happen to be Black or African American. These cases were brought into the federal system by and large after these men being prosecuted in state court. So these were conscious decisions of the U.S. Attorney's Office to bring these men who were already being prosecuted for this crime into the federal system for the sole purpose of having the court impose a 15-year mandatory minimum. And when I had raised this with prior U.S. attorney administrations, their response, again, should be concerning to everyone. Well, we don't even know the race of these people. And I'm like, to quote Carlos, like, give me a break. Are you kidding me? One, they review the arrest forms, which ordinarily has the person's race. They know that this person was arrested in Overtown and Liberty City and Opelika, these over-policed communities. So not only are their actions having this racially disproportionate effect, they're denying that they have any role in that. So I think this group and many others out there are working so hard, to change these legal systems, both in state court and federal court. And I'm grateful that we're all able to get here together and speak to this group and hopefully generate even more momentum.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Caruso. Mhm. All right. Now, Mr. Weeks, let me ask you, for criminal justice reform to work, is there a certain level of risk that is involved in it?
You know, I heard the question that was posed to Mr. Martinez, and your question was, is criminal justice reform, is it working? And I think the entire system is designed for a particular purpose. You know, we have to confront some realities in this criminal justice system. And the realities are that this country was founded on a cardinal sin, and that's the sin of slavery. That's the sin of racism that exists within this country. We don't like to talk about it because it makes people feel uncomfortable. Folks don't want to be, labeled or have fingers pointed at them or have their decisions questioned. But until we start to look at our criminal justice system through that lens, we are never going to get to a place of reform. We have to look at how we have gotten here. Our law enforcement officers were indoctrinated under the Jim Crow laws to be enforcers of race policies that held a whole group of people down merely because of the color of their skin. We have heard time and time again, when we look at the data on who enters into the criminal justice system and who exits the criminal justice system, is people of color. When I first walked into a courtroom, as an intern, I was the only black man in the courtroom without handcuffs on. And that shocked me. I was not prepared for that sobering reality of what I was going to be entering into. But I realized that when you get to a position to make decisions about policy that not affect not one case, but thousands of cases, you have to acknowledge the history of this country, the history of our system, the history of destroying families because of some mantra of, there's a war on drugs. There was no war on drugs. There was a war on black folks. There was a war on poor people. There was a war on inner cities. And we have to acknowledge that. We have to figure out what policies are going to roll back those draconian, legislative acts that we have, 3 strikes. We have VOP, we have VFO, we have HO. And I'm calling out these acronyms because we all laugh because we know it's acronym soup for us when we're in court, because every one of these they're enhancements. Enhancements for what? To put more and more people in prison for longer periods of time. And what is the end result of that? Is it working? Is there a deterrent effect? Are we seeing folks not commit those crimes because of fear of prison? I would suggest to you that is not. But what we're seeing is we're seeing law enforcement officers being emboldened throughout the country to engage in acts that are offensive to us as a community. And then when we protest all across the country, a viral moment where people finally resonate and say, hey, we're going to take a stand. We then get legislation says anti-riot legislation, you can't get together to voice your disagreement for abuses. So until we start to really focus on what we have to do, and that is make sure that we educate folks on the ills of this country, the ills of our system, to make sure we put resources into education, opportunity, allowing people to start businesses and to have some level of safety and, economic empowerment, then we're going to still have this system that is trying to oppress. We have to acknowledge the oppressive factor. I am lucky. I welcome you all to Broward County because you are in Broward County. And I'm lucky to have a state attorney that is enlightened enough to be able to recognize what is ahead of us. But you asked me, is there risk involved? Of course there's risk. There are folks and there are powers that be that do not want to see this experiment prosper. They do not want to see too young,
Young, you say young?
black.
You say young?
I'm young
You're young.
on the inside. On the inside. He's young, but I'm young on the inside. At the head of the state attorney's office, public defender's office, trying to institute policies reform. Yes, there are obstacles. Yes, there are perilous times. Yes, there are folks that are watching and waiting for an opportunity to cease and put it all to an end. But I can tell you there is conviction on this stage. There is conviction that we're going to do something better. But I'm asking you all to have faith and to recognize that it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in a snap of the finger. It's going to happen with that groundswell of support, with forums like this, bringing people together under the common need to do better for our communities, to fix the horrible tragedies of the past and find a new way forward. So yes, there are risks, but you have to have a lot of courage to be in this game. And I have the courage of the Lord and the colleagues that I've met throughout the years that are going to guide us. But I'm asking y'all to be the force that pushes this forward. Because when they come and they try to roll it back, we need the community to come forth and stand next to us and help push this forward.
Now, before we end, I do want to give an opportunity to talk about initiatives of what you all are doing, your agencies are doing in order to try to help this movement here. Mr. Katz, I'll start with you, so I haven't had you speak yet.
Thank you. Good morning again, everyone. Here at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of Florida, we really recognize a prosecutor's job extends beyond the courtroom. It's really important to us to get out in our communities. So we have violence reduction initiatives that we go into schools, do readings, talk to students, bring our prosecutors and our staff from our office into the schools. We also do reentry simulations for folks who are reentering, are returning citizens. That's very important. We partner with our Federal Bureau of Prisons and meet with inmates who are reentering society after 30 days and provide services to them because there's so many barriers to reenter society. Substance abuse issues, housing issues, child care issues. So it's very important for us to do that and provide those services. And additionally, we partner with the Federal Public Defender's Office, and we're very proud of a special thing that we call Care Court. And Mr. Meade is involved in it too and came and spoke at the anniversary of it. And it's a national model, and it's an amazing program where we have a federal judge preside over court, over people who have been released, are returning citizens. Supervised release who are on that release program. And I use the word returning citizens purposefully because these folks are people who have paid their debt to society. They have served their sentences and they have every right to reintegrate and enter into society. It's very important that they do that. And it benefits all of us. It benefits them to have a good job. I mean, it's very hard to find a job out there for folks who are returning citizens. They need certain services. They need help with housing, childcare, relationships, health care. So what Care Court does, it provides those wraparound services in an all-in-one shop under the supervision of a federal judge with the Public Defender's Office, with our probation office, and with prosecutors there. And our goal is to help these individuals reintegrate into society. And I'm very proud to say the University of Miami did a study, and if you're in Care Court, you are 95% likely not to reoffend compared to those not in Care Court. So I think that's a success story, Judge Maisha. It's a national model, and I think it should be expanded.
Thank you. Thank you. Broward and Dade, is there any initiative that's going on briefly?
Yeah, I guess, Gordon, I guess, Mr. Weeks, I guess we'll announce it here. We've been working on this thing for quite some months. Mr. Weeks twisted my arm and beat me up in back rooms and everything.
Not at all, not at
I'm
all.
joking. But I'll say this. Mr. Horn, he alluded to it earlier. He's the chief assistant state attorney for Miami-Dade. He's the neck that holds up the head, right? You know, we get to sit on these stages and look pretty sometime, and I have my backbone. She runs the office pretty much. My chief assistant state attorney, Regina Falk, she's here. I want to acknowledge her. Please stand up so they can see you. She's the first black woman to serve as the #2 in charge of a state attorney's office in the state of Florida. And she's amazing, and she was also instrumental in this program. We're proud to announce, and I'll allow Mr. Weeks to comment on it as well. We're proud to announce that we'll be the first state attorney's office in the state of Florida, one of the first state attorney's offices throughout the country, or prosecutorial offices in the country, that we're actually going to partner with the Public Defender's Office. We're going to partner with OIC. Thank you to Mr. Newton Sannon, CEO and President. We're creating a diversion program that is going to be geared toward those people that may fall in that gray area. For many of those who may understand the criminal justice system or not, they know that there are cases where we can just go forward with the case. Either we take it to trial, we drop it, or the individual pleads it out. Or if it's a first-time offense, right, normally a first-time offense, we can put that person into a diversionary program, right? And normally that is only exclusive to individuals who commit low-level first-time offenses. Mr. Weeks and myself, along with Regina Falk in my office, we were really passionate about reaching that demographic of people, which are young people as well, and also older people that'll be included in this as well, that who fall in that gray area where it's not necessarily a first-time offense, right? They may commit offense that normally under the law or under traditions, really, we wouldn't divert. We decided that we were going to be proactive. We all know that many of the people who do commit crimes or illegal offenses, the motivations behind that is the lack of economic opportunity, right? A lot of the times when you speak to individuals, returning citizens when they're coming back. And so we decided we wanted to be proactive. There's nothing in the statute, there's nothing in the Constitution that says that a state attorney should be doing this. Because we don't have the resources to do it, so we had to reach out to OIC. We had to reach out to the Public Defender's Office and others to make this happen. And so this program is titled the Economic Empowerment Today Diversion Program, where individuals who commit nonviolent felony offenses, and even some, most third-degree offenses, and there will be some second-degree offenses, that we'll allow them to enter into the program. And with partnership with OIC, they'll get vocational training skills, they'll get job placement, and we start them along that line, along that journey of economic empowerment, a sense of worth, a sense of belonging, so they can be productive citizens of society. And we'll notice, obviously, with that situation, and when we give people economic tools and empowerment, we notice that the recidivism rate is great, right? We understand that people aren't committing crimes again, and we're giving people opportunities. So I'm proud to announce to you all that we'll be signing on with OIC and the Public Defender's Office and this new program that will be giving people a second and sometimes third chance at life. And so I want to thank Mr. Weeks for his involvement and willingness to work with me. I want to thank Newton Sannon for his willingness to offer resources and tools so we can help these demographic of people out. So I appreciate each and every one of you, and I want to thank you. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Weeks to comment on that as well.
You know, and this is an example of the courage that you have to have in order to create reform. Because there is no playbook, there is no map, there is no guide on what to do. But we can look at what we know. We know that the folks that are contacting the system for low-lying offenses need to have an opportunity to do something different, an opportunity to put a roof over their head, to feed their family, to be able to have a car and get a job. And how better to do that than to get them on a track where they are learning skills, that they can be productive in this community, that they can get a trade or get some vocational training, or be able to get a job and be able to have some pride when they go home, to be able to put food on the table and a roof over their head and build family again. Well, that is how you incentivize a negative experience. no one wants to get wrapped up with the law. No one wants to get in trouble. No one wants to get arrested. But if that occurs, let's try to find some good outcomes. Let's try to find something that's going to be positive and move people in a different direction. Let's don't build cages and throw people in them, because we do not get anything but a negative result. So I am incredibly proud of the courage of our state attorney. I'm proud of having partners in our community like OIC and Newt that are courageous enough to embark on this experiment. And I can tell you, there are going to be bumps along the way because we've never been down this road. But as we work through it and we figure out how to make this work for the betterment of our community, I believe, and I'm sure we will see, that this will be more productive in the long run for individuals that find themselves in contact with the system rather than throwing them in jail. So I am proud, I'm happy, and I look forward to this and many more reforms as we move forward.
Excellent. Okay. In Dade County?
Yes, and I'm going to go on that same issue. Back in 1989, I believe our office set up the first drug court in the country. And it was a model so much so I think they got like 3,000 now around the country. And so folks who've got drug problems, instead of sending them to jail, instead of sending them to prison, we're trying to get them treatment. And so they've got a special judge, they got a special calendar to keep having these people coming back. They're testing urine, making sure they're staying on track. And the working relationship between opponents on different sides of the aisle is critically important. I've known Carlos for decades, and the relationship that he and his predecessor, Bennett Brummer, had with Catherine Fernandez Rundle and Miss Reno, her predecessor, and even the relationship that we have assists us in being able to do things like Mr. Pryor just mentioned. So a few years ago, we decided we were going to go down the road to do a mental health court. And it's on the felony, we got it in misdemeanor level, but now we're going to the felony level. And the thing we've always got to be concerned about as a state attorney's office, protecting the community, is if we call it wrong and that person goes out there and kills someone, we're going to be the ones who are going to be attacked. And so we had to make some critical decisions about what level of offenses are we going to allow for persons to go into the mental health court. Because again, we're going to take them out of the criminal justice system that has them on the track to going to jail or prison, and we're going to try to treat the problem of their mental illness. We've now got a veterans court. Same thing. You got folks with PTSD. Okay, we're going to send this to veterans court and take a chance that we're going to get this person healed and treated for this illness, and hopefully they won't go out there with an AK-47, you know, and mow down some folks. So yeah, it's risky, but at the end of the day, you have treated folks, you have assisted them, and now you have turned their lives around. And I want to go back to what Desmond was saying earlier. This is an economy that benefits some folks when you've got people you're sending to prison. I'm just sorry. It's a business. It's a business. And everything we do like this impacts their business, which is why some folks don't want these kinds of things to prosper. So I'm counsel for the Dade County Grand Jury, and we were doing an investigation some years ago. I had Desmond Meade come down, and he was a witness, testified to the grand jury when we were looking at the issue of Amendment 4 on the ballot. And he was educating the grand jury on what this would do, and we had information about other states and what they did for their folks who were going to prison. We got some states in this country, while you are in jail, you can still vote. When you walk, some other states, when you walk out of prison, you get your right to vote back automatically. The citizens in this country voted overwhelmingly, black, white, Hispanic, men, women, gay, straight, whatever, that we want people to have the right to vote once they have served their time. And they passed it primarily because of this man right here. And then even after all of that work, what did the legislature do? We're going to create another darn barrier to make it more difficult for these people who've served their time. Why? Because Jesus. Okay. And so. You know why. I'm sorry. Okay. And so, again, we have got to have that legislature, you've got to have that executive officer, as Mr. Pryor mentioned earlier, involved in this process. And even when they did that, state attorney said, we're going to still come up with some way to help these people get the right to vote. And you know you came down, and we came up with some stuff. We were still doing this. But you got to give people value. We are doing this same thing. I was investigating. Look at some other states. While they've got people in prison, they are teaching them trades. They are teaching them woodwork. They're teaching them this, so that the moment they walk out of prison, they're walking into a job. And now this person has got value. This man is now able to take care of his family. He feels like he is a redeemed person, and he is contributing to society. And we can do that, but the problem is it's going to tear down the business model that they got for sending people to prison. And so it's going to take people like you to keep sending the right people up to Tallahassee to kind of say, no, this is what we want to do. We don't want to just send them to prison. We want to help rehabilitate them while they're up there.
Your Honor,
Yes.
when you have a panel of lawyers, politicians, and preachers, there should be no expectations of brief comments. I can tell you that right now. So.
Correct. How are we? 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Okay. So I know you have great organizations, so I want you all to talk about them and what you all are doing as well before we wrap up.
Well, I'm not going to talk about my organization because I'm looking at this audience, and I think it's something that's much more needed than for me talking about my organization, even though we are doing the fines and fees assistance, and you all can donate at our website to help people out. But, but I think what's most important is really the charge. I want to give you all a charge. I want to give you all a challenge. I want to ask you all to be audacious enough to love. To love. And what I mean by that, Michael Vick was convicted in the federal courts of dogfighting. And those of you all know dogfighting is a very vicious spectacle. We have equivalent of it down here, cockfighting, right? And it's a very bloody and gory spectacle. And especially with these dog fightings, you know, there's dogs, so they want to grab a hold of that neck, and they're shaking that neck until that dog is dead. And I ask people all the time, in the Michael Vick incident, how many people got mad at those dogs? How many people got mad at those violent, vicious animals? No one. They got mad at the person that created the conditions, right? They got mad at the person that put these dogs in a position to react the way they reacted. Their response to those violent, vicious dogs was love. Everybody wanted to find those dogs loving homes, right? And if we can respond like that to animals, why can't we respond like that to human beings? And this is not a novel approach. It is something that we see within us, right, that we even talked about even during Amendment 4. It was something that we see within us. It's evident. Our response to the Surfside collapse, right, our response in the aftermath of natural disasters have always been along the lines of humanity. No one comes across an accident scene, sees someone laying on the ground, and decide to go and help, and to have the first question be, did you vote for Donald Trump? Or have the first question be, what's your sexual identity or your immigration status? Right? It's moments we have shown time and time again that we can deal with each other along the lines of humanity. We can react and respond to each other with love. We do that with our kids. And so we can look at a baseline for criminal justice reform as how would we react if it was our son, our daughter, right? And if we can take that mindset, you would see all the reform you need, right? And this world would be much safer, right? This country would be more united, and this country would be much greater than what it is today. Take the challenge, y'all.
All right. Final word, Mr. Jones? Mr. Jones, final word, go ahead.
So, being a returning citizen, just to be frank and honest with you, I have no confidence in the justice system wanting to reform people. I have no confidence in it. But I have confidence in the people who are working hard to try to make a difference every day, like this panel, right? And you. So for me, I think the best example I can show is for me to continue to be a walking billboard so that people in our community can see what reform look like when they see me, when they see my actions, right? And so, fortunately, 4.5 years ago, the organization in which I work for had the opportunity to request a public school that was abandoned in one of the most high crime rates area in the country. And we was given the opportunity to occupy a 58,000 square feet facility. And so when we got the opportunity, I'm saying to myself now, what use this abandoned school that nobody wanted can be for our community? And the thought came was, bring some agencies together under one roof that can be a turnkey for people who are trying to get their life back on track. So I'm happy to say, in that 58,000 square feet facility that's on 5.3 acres of land that we pay $1 a year for, right? We have OIC that has a space in that facility that deal with reentry and training. We have Career Source South Florida that deal with job placement. And then we have the Circle of Brotherhood, right? That had the audacity to be convicted felons to reach out to the major police departments in Miami-Dade County to train them in our facility. So all the cadets that come through the city of Miami and Miami-Dade County Police Department have to come to our facility for a full day of training so that they can see what black men of color that live in low neighborhoods, what they go through. So mind you now, most of these, and don't let me leave out, the public defender's office. So we train new lawyers in the police office, public defender's office. We train cadets in Miami-Dade County, in the city of Miami, right? So they have to come to our facility and be trained by men who have been incarcerated so they can hear their side of the story. And I'm telling you, when they come there and when they leave, it's a totally different story. And mind you, most of these young kids, these young people that's going into the public defender's office and the being police officers, never served or worked or went to school in areas in which we serve. So can you imagine taking a 19-year-old kid that never walked the streets in Liberty City and Overtown, that probably in some cases came from a privileged family, right, that never had friends of color, now they leave the academy and dropped in our neighborhood where they're scared, they're nervous, right, and don't know the culture of our people. So for 4 years now, we've been doing that. And I would say that that training has changed the mindset in our community of how the police deal with people of color in our neighborhood. So my closing word is be encouraged, continue to fight, that know that this is all about money. That's all it's about. It's all about money, right? And that old regime. And so let's concentrate more on the young people because the older people is already embedded in them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Judge,
Thank you.
Judge, may I?
Thank you.
Just one last thing,
Oh,
Judge.
I could hear. Okay, good.
You know, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at the colleagues on this panel, and I recognize how esteemed they are. And from the outside looking in, folks would, you know, think that everyone in Florida is so open to the idea of reform. And the reason why I want to put this in stark contrast for you is that, you know, I was reading a paper yesterday, and someone said that Florida is where woke comes to die. Y'all read that. Y'all know who said it. All right? And when I read that, I said to myself, man, we got a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. Because if there are folks in this room that are so moved and compelled to try to do better with our system, try to do better with our communities, try to do better with our criminal justice system, we got folks in other rooms that feel exactly the opposite. And we have to figure out a way to infect them with what we see and what we know, to infect them with the love of people, the love of community, to infect them with the opportunity for betterment. We have to figure out a way, because woke don't come here to die. Woke was born here. It was born in me and every one of us on this stage, and we're going to make sure it lives, it breathes, and it survives in Florida every single day.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. So we all have our marching orders from this point forward, but I just want to thank all the panelists that came today. Your presence, your words, it means so much. And thank you for your service to our community. We're very fortunate to have leaders and experts such as you all. So thank you today. Thank you.
And we're fortunate to have judges like you.
And I apologize for us going over time.